and welcome to the week 6 lesson. I know it's further than that, but technically it's the week 6 lesson. We're not on week 6, but it's the week 6 lesson. Reviewing week 5 before we move into the quiz, which was over adjectives and especially pronouns is where we wound up spending the vast majority of our time, and especially on the homework assignment. All right, so let's go over the questions. We already did 1 and 2. They were on the adjectives. We did that the week prior. Now we'll do 3 and 4 and basically the rest of them. So number 3, which Koine pronouns are truly personal? Which Koine pronouns that are truly personal have gender? None. Yeah, because the first and second person pronouns, they are truly personal, but they don't have gender. The third person pronoun isn't actually truly personal, but it does have gender, so none of them actually meet both requirements. So the correct answer is none. None are truly personal and have gender at the same time.
Thank you. Okay.
Number 4, the case of Koine pronouns is usually determined by what?
Function.
Its function in, yes, its function in its sentence and its clause, whatever you want to say, but it is determined by how it is being used, usually. This one isn't a part of the question, of course, but does anyone know the, can you give me an example of a pronoun that's case doesn't always follow that rule?
I'm enough to look at my notes. I might find it. No, I don't know offhand.
Yeah. Most of the time, pronouns cases are determined by the function. If it's nominative, it's telling you who's doing the action in the verb. If it's accusative, it's the thing that's being acted on in the verb, so on and so forth. That's usually how it works, but there's one in particular. You could probably make an argument for some others, but one in particular that doesn't always follow that rule.
A pronoun that doesn't always follow the rule?
Yeah. Whose case isn't always determined by its function. This one is one that has exceptions. Not a part of the question. This is just out there, good information to know so that it doesn't catch you off guard when you see it.
And is it in our notes?
It is in your notes.
Is it letter F, the one I have circled?
I don't know what letter F is.
I don't know the letters well enough to tell you. It's an O with a little thingy on the top, and then the S is at the end, and it makes a difference. It makes a different.
Is it Haas?
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Haas?
Yep, Haas. You are right. That is the relative pronoun.
Okay, all right.
And yes, that is indeed the one that it's a little bit weird. Like I said, you could maybe make an argument for some of the others, but that one definitely does not always follow the rules on it. Its function isn't always going to determine its case. Sometimes its antecedent will determine its case, so it's a little weird. But that was free and bonus. All right, 5. I said translate the following words. Some of these you guys could just look up in the chart and say, hey, I'm done. And then others of them, they weren't in the chart, but I did give you some basic information. However, it always seems much more basic on the tail end than when you're at the other end. All right, so for outone, was that one that you could look up in the chart or not?
Yes.
Yes, it was. So that one was third person, so which chart is that? Is that going to be the ego chart, the su chart, or the autos chart?
Autos.
Autos, correct. So we look it up in there, we look for something that's genitive, plural, neuter in the autos chart, and what did you guys come up with?
Them or their.
I said from them.
From them or of them?
Of them or their.
Yep, of them, from them, or their. Any of those would work. That is appropriate. Heis is the next one, number 6, and I actually kind of like it. I know it's not in the chart. I know that, but when you look it up, when you look up 4005, and you look up the main Greek word that is actually referencing, which main Greek word was that? Does anyone remember?
I don't.
No. It is Haas. It is Haas. So all of these are going to reference back to one of those ones. It's either going to be ego, su, autos, hutas, ekenos, or Haas. It's always going to reference back to one of those. And so this one references back to Haas, which means it's what kind of pronoun? Is it one of the personal pronouns?
Is it dative, plural, feminine?
This is true.
Okay.
I'm talking about the broad categories, though. Is it one of the personal pronouns? Is it one of the demonstratives? Or is it the relative pronoun?
No, I think it's the relative.
You are correct. It is the relative pronoun. And the relative pronoun can only be translated in two ways in basic modern English. There used to be a third way, whom, but almost nobody uses that anymore, at least not properly. And it's falling out of English, unfortunately. So we don't really use whom anymore, so what are the other two ways it could be translated?
Who or which?
Who or which.
Oh, great.
So yeah, if you have who, which, or whom, you're okay.
I didn't.
Just pick one of those three. Like I said, whom technically I wouldn't require, but some people, they might want to use the objective case if they want to. And that's okay. So that one, you look it up in the thing, you figure out what the main word is, and then you look up the main word in the notes, and you got the information that you need. All right, and then number 7 was hemos. And what category of pronoun is this going to be? Is it going to be a personal, demonstrative, or relative?
Personal.
Good. How do you know just by looking at the information there that it's personal?
Because it's in first person. It says first person.
Yeah, it has a number on it.
Yes.
So pretty good bet, especially given this lesson. We didn't cover a whole lot of other things. Turns out the verbs also have person in them as well, so watch out for that in the future. But we're not anywhere near verbs yet, so it's a pretty safe bet it was going to be a pronoun.
Yes.
So yeah, it is going to be one of the personal pronouns, and now we just have to figure out which one of the three. Is it ego, su, or autos?
Okay.
Which one is that first person? Which one goes with that one?
It would be that first one you said. Let go my ego.
It's accusative plural, though.
Yeah, and we will need that, but right now we're just figuring out where to look in the notes right now.
The ego.
Yeah, it's the ego.
Or first person. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ego.
So yeah, that'll be the first person pronoun. And then, like you said, it is accusative and plural. So in that chart, in the ego chart, we look for accusative and plural.
And that's us.
Us, yep. Us.
So how is that first person? Us.
Us includes me. It's in the objective case, but it still includes me.
It's go. Yeah, it's us.
Yeah.
Me and you.
You and me together, us. Yep. All right, and then su. Which category is this one going to be? Is it going to be personal, demonstrative, or is it going to be relative?
It's going to be
Personal.
It is going to be personal. How do you know just by looking at it?
Because of it being in second person.
It has a number on it, so pretty good bet.
Yes.
This is going to be something that's going to be personal, and it is a 2, which tells us it's second person. So we can find the second person chart, so that's going to be under the su. And we look for genitive and singular. And what do we come up when we do that?
Of you or your.
Correct. Of you or your. Which is kind of ambiguous in English because your could actually be plural as well, but of course saying of you could also be plural as well, because English just isn't specific that way. Our second person pronoun just kind of covers everything. Yeah, we're very ambiguous. All right, so su was of you or your, being singular. It's hard to get that across in English, but it is singular.
Okay.
And then number 9, tuta. What did we come up with for that one? Did we figure out that it was personal, demonstrative, or relative?
I lost track of those words. That's going to be.
Okay, it's.
I don't see those. I don't see that word on your chart.
It's.
Well, it doesn't have a number on it. We can at least see that, right?
It's true.
Okay, so if it doesn't have a number on it, it's probably not going to be first, second, or third person. So the personal ones are out, which means it's either going to be one of the demonstratives or it's going to be the relative. And you're right. By looking at it, it doesn't seem to match the words that are given there on the page, which probably means it's been inflected in some way. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to look it up and look at what the main word actually is, and then we can match that main word to what's in the notes. So when we look up 4047, which of the main words does it map onto? Does it match onto the hutas? Does it match onto the ekenos? Or does it match onto the has? And of course, the purists out there who study Greek formally are sitting there going, "You're just matching up numbers?" Yes, we are, because we are going to cheat.
Because we are basic here.
Yes,
So it's
we try to keep it simple.
this, which would be in the demonstrative.
Well, what is the main Greek word that it references?
Oh.
That's the what you want to look for.
I found it.
Hutas.
Hutas, yes.
This very thing.
So you look
Yeah.
up the hutas.
So you look up hutas in your notes, and it will tell you that it is either what or what.
This.
This or
This or
in the notes.
This or these.
this or these.
This or these, correct. And then we look at the parsing code that's there on the homework page to figure out which one should it be. Should it be the this or should it be the these?
S or singular would be
This.
This, correct.
That's what I wrote down.
Yep, so tuta is this.
Please be right.
Yep. So nominative, singular, neuter. Singular is just this. If it was plural, it would be these, but it's not, so we don't have to worry about it.
Okay.
All right, the number 11, you might kind of know which one that maps onto because it actually wasn't
Okay.
morphed too much. Which one did I say?
You said
Yeah, we're on.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
My apologies, I was looking at the right one. That doesn't help you guys much though. Number 10, my apologies. Number 10, you're right. So looking at number 10, you can probably guess which one that is supposed to be. Is it going to be ego? Is it going to be su? Is it going to be autas? Is it going to be hutas? Is it going to be ekenos? Or is it going to be has?
Just by looking at it, you can see that?
Not gonna
Yeah.
be Haas, because it
It's
is
not going to be has. It's way too long for that, that's for
and
sure.
It's not on it's not on the chart,
So it's not going to be ego, su, or autas.
so it's
It's either going to be hutas or ekenos. Yeah. And when in doubt, look it up and see what it matches as far as the main word is.
really
So yeah, look at 1697 and see what word it matches.
eknos.
Ekenos.
Ekenos.
Yep. Ekenos.
On this.
So we in the notes we look up ekenos, and
Oh, it's
that's
here.
yep. And it's
That
one
those.
of yep. It's one of the demonstratives. It's either that or those. And we look at the parsing code to tell us which one is it going to be. Is it going to be the that or is it going to be the those?
Okay, now, okay.
So we looked up 1697.
1697.
We found the main word that it references, and that is ekenos. So in our homework, we went back to where it talked about ekenos. Well, sorry, not in the homework, but in the notes.
Notes,
The
okay.
notes. In the notes, we looked for ekenos, and we found it has two different ways it could be translated, depending on if it's singular or plural.
There are those.
We look at the parsing code, and does the parsing code tell us it's singular or plural?
It's plural,
It's plural.
so it's the.
Those. Those.
So ekenos, it would be demonstrative.
Yeah, ekenos is a demonstrative.
Okay.
Hutas and ekenos are the demonstratives.
Okay.
One is the near, one is the far.
Okay.
All right, any questions about 10?
But okay, in the parsing, it doesn't say demonstrative.
No, it's
Not.
no,
You have to deduce that, I guess, because it's not.
you just need to know your pronouns is what it comes down to. You need to know ego, you need to know su, you need to know autas, hutas, ekenos, and has. You need to know those 6 pronouns. You don't necessarily need to know all the different ways that they parse, but you do need to know those 6 words.
Okay, so that's another chart or list. Okay.
Well, it's just Greek.
I know, but yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, those words you need to know, at least the main ones. You guys have parsing codes that'll help you get around all the other stuff, but you need to know the main 6 words that they reference. Does this reference one of the personal pronouns? Does this reference one of the demonstratives or the relative pronoun?
So we've got autos, ekenos, or whatever that is.
Yeah, you have hutas,
Where's hutas? That's the first one.
the first demonstrative.
Okay, and then ekenos, or whatever that's called.
Yep, and kenos is the second demonstrative.
Okay.
And then the relative pronoun has, and of course all the personal pronouns. So the ego, su, and autas.
Okay.
Yeah, so there should be 6 total.
Okay, so
So So basically the ones in the charts, and then I think it's the next page over from that is where you have the others.
That way I'll know it all together. Star. Okay. Okay, sorry.
You're fine, you're fine. I'd rather that you have that in the notes.
Auto, almost like auto. Altos.
Autos.
Altos.
Yep, autos. Like ow. Autos. So the first two are ego and su, then autos, then hutas, ekenos, has.
Okay. So I said all, because I put it with stars now, I said all 6 stars are what you look to for pronoun determiners, right? Does that make sense?
Depending on how you use the word determiners.
I know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's a general determiner versus like broken down in these kind of determiners.
Well, it is the word. The rest of it is just the morphology. So those are the words.
Yes.
Autos, su, ego.
Yes, yes.
All the different forms that it can take is just morphological changes.
Okay.
So you're.
Okay.
So this is those are basically what would be called the lexical forms, the forms that you look up in the lexicon, that'll reference to.
So it'd be more of its morphology. Is that what you're saying?
No, what you're looking up is the lexical form, and everything else is morphology.
Okay, so how would I say that all 6 stars are what you look to for pronoun? What?
You would just say that these are the lexical forms of the pronouns.
Lexical forms, okay. Okay, there we go. Okay, got it.
All right, are we ready for number 11?
Sure.
Why not?
Yeah.
All right, so number 11 is aute, and same basic question, is this going to be a personal? Is it going to be a demonstrative, or is it going to be a relative?
It'll be personal.
Okay, and what's the giveaway?
The number.
It has the number. And which number is it?
3rd person.
Okay, so which pronoun is that? Is that going to be ego, su, autos, hutas, ekenos, or has?
Altos.
It is going to be autos, correct. So in autos, we look for something that is dative, singular, feminine.
Dative, singular, feminine, to her, right?
Yeah, that would work. Aute to her. That'll do.
Okay. I did that one to her.
Woohoo! All right, number 12. We have human, which is not to be confused with human. Human. And same basic question. Is it going to be a personal, a demonstrative, or a relative?
Personal.
It is personal. What was the giveaway?
Number.
Has a number. And which personal pronoun is this going to be? Is it going to be ego, su, or autos?
Su.
It is going to be su. So in that part of the chart, we look for something that is dative and plural. And what do we come up with?
Said to you all.
To y'all.
To you all. Yep.
Yay.
To you all. It's dative, so it has to have that to. Dative could also be for. There's a few different ways you could do the dative, but to is kind of the default one.
Okay. But it could change depending on the context.
Depending on context, yeah. But to is usually a safe default. Start out with that, and then if that doesn't work, then branch out into something else.
Okay.
If you hit a brick wall, then move in your direction. But hit the brick wall first.
Okay.
Which is not good driving instructor advice, by the way.
We don't want to drink.
That's how we translate this. Yeah, I need to pick a better metaphor next time.
Huh?
I need a better metaphor next time because that one doesn't work very well.
No, I understood.
All right, and then number 13, we have me. And same question, is it going to be personal, demonstrative, or relative?
Personal.
It is personal. So is it going to be ego, su, or autos?
Ego.
You are right. Ego. And as was said, the one gave it away. We know this is personal because it has the one on it. And because it's first person, because it's the one, we know that it's going to be ego and not su or autos. So it's ego. So in the ego part of the chart, we look for something that is accusative and singular. And what do we get? Me. Me, me, me. Crazy minds think alike.
You don't relate it, though.
Pretty much. All right, so we have me for number 13. And yay, we're almost done with this one. Problem 14. We have ho, like ho, ho, ho. Ho, and we need to first figure out what kind of a pronoun this is. So we're either going to need to look it up or you could have it memorized, but I don't think anyone would have it memorized. So probably look it up. Look up 4005 and see what it references. Does it reference ego? Does it reference su? Does it reference autos? Does it reference hutas? Does it reference akenos? Does it reference has? Which one is it?
It references has.
Has. So what kind of pronoun is that?
That is a
Demonstrative singular.
No.
No, it's the has. It's the who, which.
Has.
It's
Or,
the
who.
relative.
It's relative pronoun.
It's a relative. There we go.
Okay, relative pronoun. And the nice thing about relative pronouns is there's not really a whole lot of ways you can translate them.
So who or which.
Yeah, basically who or which. You could put the dative in there and you could say to who or to which.
I said two.
Yeah, and that would be just fine. Sometimes in translation that doesn't really come across as well. It's a little awkward saying it that way, but that would be an appropriate way to think of it when you're first starting out. You know, before you actually get into the nuts and bolts of whatever you're translating, thinking to this would be fine with it being dative.
Okay, so on my little sheet here where I'm writing my pronouns, the ones from your chart, the ego, the oo, the ow, however you pronounce that.
Ego.
These three, and the autos. Those are personal pronouns.
Ego.
Ego.
Su.
Su, that's it, su.
Autos.
Autos.
Those are the three personal pronouns.
Okay.
The rest of it is just morphology. But those are the three personal pronouns. Well, autos is not always personal, but we've already discussed
So the one
that.
that means this and that is a demonstrative.
Yep, there are two demonstratives.
Yes, okay. I'll give myself a note.
Yep.
Demonstrative, and then the other one
Is the
has
relative.
is- okay.
Yeah, so 3, 2, 1.
Oh, that's good idea. Okay. That works. I'll have to chart it out later, but yeah.
I do apologize for this. I know it's sometimes a little bit awkward when you're falling behind someone else, trying to figure out what they thought.
It's just
This is true. You are not wrong.
It's great.
It's just Greek. That's all it is.
complicated.
You're not wrong at all.
Alright.
All right. For 15, what did you guys get?
Oh, jeez. I got a bunch of dribble. I said this that I have written to you about them who are trying to deceive them.
Well, we got a lot of the parts there.
I got some of the parts. Yeah. I'm not sure if I got it right or not.
Yeah. We'll first start out with taute there. Did we get that taute was a personal, a demonstrative, or a relative?
It was
Tauta. Tauta, tauta, tauta.
it was autos, demonstrative. Autos.
Is it hutas or autos?
Autos.
Because I wrote this.
How are you getting autos?
Because it's these.
Autos is the third person.
It's lots of T.
No, it's the other one.
Hutas.
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 Yeah, so,
Right here, it's this very thing. This.
Oh, that's what.
okay, so it is a demonstrative. It's hutas. Then we go to the
Hutas.
the notes, and we look up hutas, and there's two possibilities for hutas. It's either going to be this or it's going to be these.
These, because it's plural.
Because it's plural. So these I have written, and then what do we get for the human?
To you.
To you all. It's plural. Yep. So these I have written to you all, because it's dative, so you have to have that to in there. These I have written to you all about, and then for the tone, that's a DRP. What do we get for that?
He who is.
He who is would be good for the DRP, except with one thing about this one.
Yeah, no, we had to.
He who is trying to.
No, we're saying that's a good placeholder, but that's not right because there's a problem with the. When you look at the parsing code, is it singular or is it plural?
Plural.
That's plural, so it can't be he because that's singular.
Oh, so I had them.
Oh, they.
Them who are. They who are.
Yeah, they who are. You could put it that way.
Okay.
So these I have written to you about they who are trying to deceive
No.
you all.
No.
Yeah, these I have written to you about they who are trying to deceive you all.
I
Or
wasn't too far off.
I have written these to you all, they who are trying to deceive you all.
No,
Why did I write that down?
I don't know. You also left out the preposition.
Okay, so say it again, slowly.
All right, so these I have written.
These I have. Where did I write it down? These I have written to you all.
To you all.
To you all about they who are trying to deceive you all.
They who are trying to deceive you all.
They who are trying to deceive you all.
Always love it when somebody says, well, I looked it up on Blue Letter Bible, so I know what it really means. It's like, you don't know the first thing about Greek. Don't tell me that you looked up something on Blue Letter Bible and, I looked it up in the lexicon, therefore I know. No, a lot of language has to do with how things fit together. And morphology, which you're not going to get by looking at Blue Letter Bible. It just doesn't work that way. Real translation takes time and a whole lot of patience.
Okay,
And a whole lot of heartache.
so where was I going with my translation?
I don't know. I was there with you when you did it.
I know, but you said that was right.
I don't remember saying that was right.
I have written these to you all.
So you just reorganized the word.
I did reorganize it, but I did get something wrong in the reorganizing. And I think you said it was okay, but I'm wondering if I copied it wrong.
Maybe. I know that we talked about switching the these with the I have written just because one is nominative, the other one's accusative, which would be okay. I have written these to you all about they who are trying to deceive you all. That would be a fine translation as well.
About, that's what I did wrong. Okay, about who are trying to deceive you all?
They who are.
About they who are. Okay, so I just forgot the about. That was my problem. Okay.
Yeah, like I said, you missed the preposition.
Yes.
Those prepositions are killers, man. Well, actually, that might have been it, because on that one we started talking about how prepositions and cases work together, and I think we just got off on a tangent.
That's true.
They're dangerous things.
You can mess up on stuff.
All right, 16. What do we get for 16? Any guesses at least? Which is what usually happens at the beginning.
And you helped me so.
Well, so I said, if the one who was Lord and Master so decrees it, we'll live and accomplish. And then I got stuck and put this or that.
Well, that's literally what it is this or that. Yeah, tuta references hutas, and ekeno references ekenos. So, yeah, this or that is fine. But the stuff at the beginning does need a little bit of work on that one. So what was the stuff that you had at the beginning?
Said if the one who is.
You said if the one who is the master, right?
Who is Lord and Master.
Okay.
Lord and Master?
Because that word, yeah.
She put both of those in there because it could have been Lord or Master. Remember, you told me to use.
But you don't say Lord and Master, though.
Yeah, I think she.
You have to pick one or the other.
Okay, it's the one who's Lord.
She
so
was-
decrees it.
She was.
Master too, though.
And where are you getting the so decrees it?
You got the word decrees on the paper.
But where are you getting the it from?
I added it.
Okay.
Because you've got the words in that case.
Mm-hmm.
So if the Lord decrees it, well, you just can't leave out those words.
No, you can't.
So I don't know what else to do with them. So I just added some words to make it.
Which is what a lot of translators would do.
Yeah, well.
A lot of them are wrong.
So what should it be, Mr. John?
Actually, most of it I like. So if the Lord or the Master so decrees, probably put in a dash for the Greek comma.
Oh.
Dash in that case will live and accomplish this or that. So if the Master so decrees, dash in that case will live and accomplish this or that.
Because you don't have to have it in there.
Yeah, there is no it in the original Greek, and so you wouldn't want to put it in unless you have to.
Yeah.
Because the Master so decrees.
Yeah, because it's still sufficient by saying he so decrees, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's the
But then
difference
there's a little dash for the comma, you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Greek comma is
Okay.
a little flexible because Greek only has 4 main punctuation marks.
Right.
So sometimes we have to help them out a little bit.
Because that was messing me up. So I was like, that does not make sense. Because that in that case needed to have something. And then when the dash is put in there, I was like, that makes more sense.
Yep.
Don't ask me how to describe it at this stage.
Now, as far as the first way that you said on doing it, it would be appropriate for a stylistic choice once you get down to stylistics and saying, okay, let's make sure that this flows in English. That's how we would more typically say it in English, because I guarantee you no one's going to say it like that. But what I'm trying to get across here is that you start off with you guys want to be as formal as possible in the translation, and then you can work on stylistics later. We're going to start out doing NASB. You guys can work up to NLT if you want to. But we're going to start NASB. All right. And then 17. 17, if you recognize what was going on, is like, oh, I know this one. I know what's been talking about here. Or you just came up with really strange stuff. There's like one or the other. So what did you guys come up with?
You can help on this one.
I did, so go
I
ahead.
said, I baptize them in water, but will baptize you with the Holy Spirit.
Really close.
I put in or with the Holy Spirit.
And that part is, that's okay. I'm not concerned about that. But you says, did you say I baptize them?
I did.
Yeah.
Because at 707 up above, I had the word. Oh, I had they. Okay, so I got the wrong word there.
Yeah, it shouldn't be them.
So I baptize you in water.
Really close.
No,
I baptize you all in water.
There you go. It's plural.
Plural.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's plural because of that S thing on the end, right?
No, because in the parsing code it tells you that it's,
AP2.
yeah, the P in there tells you it's plural. But other than that, pretty much exactly. So I baptized you with water or in water. It's dative. Normally we would say to water with dative, but that doesn't really make sense here. So that's when you start playing around with other prepositions you can throw in there with datives. And when you're talking about baptism, in or with would be appropriate, yeah.
Yes.
And then so we have I baptized you all in water. And then you notice that the autos and the de was reversed for how it would be in English. The but is usually how we would start the next clause, right? We would say, but he. And so we have to do that in English translation. But in Greek, it actually starts out with the autos. He, but, which is weird.
You don't want to know.
You don't go there. Don't go there. Yeah. So, but he will baptize you all in the Holy Spirit. And you have to add in the just to kind of make it make sense. But, yeah. So yeah, I baptized you all in water, but he will baptize you all in the Holy Spirit. I did try to pick somewhat iconic ones for that one, but there we go. And then on 18, we found out that there was some typos in that one.
I don't have anything.
Actually, I think there was also a typo in 17 for you people who are listening online. I think on 17, the autos was supposed to be a .3.
Well, it seemed like it worked out okay.
Well, it did work out okay, but
Okay.
that is supposed to be a third-person pronoun reference,
Okay,
so it's
so-
supposed to have a 3 there.
Okay, so.
And I don't think it was in your guys'
And
homework.
17, which one was?
Right under autos, I have it highlighted on the screen, the little blue line.
9, okay, 3. So it still worked out without it.
It still worked out without it, but I think that was supposed to be on there.
Okay,
And I
so-
apologize for typos.
So what should it say then, if you have the third person?
Well, it would still be he.
Oh, so it still worked out, okay.
Yeah, so if you looked it up and you realized that it was autos and nominative singular masculine, you still got it.
Okay,
But it's nice to know ahead of time so you don't have to look it up to figure out that it's autos. Well, it actually says that it's autos. So yeah, on this one you can kind of fudge on it, but
okay.
yeah, I'm pretty sure there was supposed to be a 3 there. I'll have to look it up, but I'm pretty sure that was supposed to be a 3. And then on 18, there were 2 things that happened on this one that really messed things up. First of all, the transfer program that I had that converted it into PDF did not catch the M here on Megista. And so on your guys' pages, it was just Egista without the mu. So it's supposed to have a mu on there, and unfortunately the PDF program did not pick that up. And then Mom and I found out that Mounts actually had a typo.
Wow.
Yeah, Mounts put in 3492, and what did we find out was supposed to be like 3489?
3489.
Yeah, so that's supposed to be 89.
There is no 3492 in there, because 3492 is not
How
a
come I
point
wrote down the
in
word great man?
It's probably just because you picked the one that was nearest.
You probably did 91 or 93.
I don't know what I did.
Yeah, so
What
yeah,
did I do?
yeah. So Mounts,
91.
yeah, Mounts made an error on that one. There is,
Doesn't make any sense.
yeah, it's not there.
Wow.
Yeah, that will do it. That will do it. So
So I quit.
that one was a fairly.
No wonder you quit.
It's like, I don't get it.
I don't know what this is. All right. So for the person who I was there to actually point out that this was a problem, what did you get?
So you want me to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It says through which he has given the precious and greatest promises to us.
Well, I got promise, great, and precious.
And there's promises.
Yeah.
'Cause
The promises is plural.
yes.
Okay.
Okay, through which he has given the precious and greatest promises to us. Because you had a superlative for that greatest, and that was a new one to throw in there for me. So I was like, oh. Yeah.
We actually talked about that time before last.
I know, but
I should do that, so.
yeah, brain.
Yep.
Yes. And now I remember it, but at the time it was like,
Yeah, you never think of it at the time. Your brain just fries. It's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing anymore.
That's what mine does.
Yeah.
oh. I'm just a kid.
Great and precious
Yeah.
promises.
Are you
Through which he
overthinking
has
things?
given us great and precious promises. Through
Give-
which he has given us great and precious promises.
Through which he has given the great and precious promises to us, because it's dative.
Ah, put to us on that.
Through which he has given the great and the precious and greatest promises to us.
He has given
Oh.
them to us.
You might just want to let her see it.
You need to see.
That might be easier.
Through which he has given
It's easier to copy when you have something to copy.
the greatest. Okay, that's what I had the first time.
He has given
The
the precious and greatest promises to us.
Turn my words around.
And with more context, we could determine if that which was supposed to be a who, because it might be talking about a person, it might not. But you guys didn't have the rest of the context, so you can't tell if it's who or which.
Okay.
That's just in there to hold the place. But with more context, you could tell. If it's talking about someone, it'd be who. If it's talking about a concept or idea, it's which.
Okay, so she had mentioned through which he has given to us the precious and greatest promises. How come not that?
It's not necessarily determinative on that one. The biggest idea on that one was just keeping everything in place.
Some kind of an order.
Well,
Well, 'cause
Depends on what you count as an order.
Okay.
English order is what we're thinking.
The thing that I was correcting her on was that she didn't have to us. It just she just said given to you instead of to us.
Okay, and then she cut. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought
Yeah.
you were saying.
It's not order specific. It was the verbiage that she chose. It was the wrong pronoun.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, because you can change the order on that one a few different ways, and it'll still basically mean the same thing.
Okay, I thought you were correcting where she put the two.
No, not necessarily where she put it. It was the pronoun that was the problem.
I copied what I heard because I had nothing.
Yeah, that's okay too. All right, so we've run the gauntlet. We've only died twice. It's fine.
Don't let beat me up.
Yes.
Pretty much.
Just saying.
Gauntlet. It's kind of like guillotine.
Because I forget to build a week.
I do too.
I forget to go
I
my
do
phone
too.
out.
Well, and as we've discussed before, I mean, there's no easy way to learn a second language. And languages, they build on each other. And it's hard to find the kind of time to build on it like that.
Yeah.
It takes, so that's basically all that this class is basically info dump, and then play with it on your own.
Well, yeah, that makes me feel a little better because I mean I don't mind playing with it on my own, but you know I'm not keeping the scope and sequence like this. I'm chopping.
Yeah, but at least you get to ask me questions from time to time.
Boy, you know I ask you lots of questions. Some of it's, huh?
So when you said words,
What do you think me?
all right, so let's go ahead and get started on the next one here.
Do we have to have a quiz?
We have to have a quiz. Oh, I forgot.
We don't have to have a quiz?
No, we have quiz music.
Oh, do it
Online
low.
people.
Do it low though. I don't want it too loud.
How low can you go?
Yeah, because it'll mess me up if it's too loud. That's pretty okay.
Commercial questions.
Yeah, there we go. That's muy bueno.
All right, and questions.
Okay.
Cheat sheet.
Yes, open book, open note, just not phone a friend.
What's he saying there? Grammatical.
Okay, you're not my friend.
I remember reading something like that.
It's okay, which corner?
This will be in the section on adjectives. So this wasn't last week, but the week before.
Oh, okay, that was week 5, adjectives and pronouns? Okay, so.
Specifically just the adjectives.
Is this a trick question?
Actually, no. Yeah, there was one degree that was being absorbed by another, so that one that is doing the absorbing has 2.
But not vice versa. Okay, got it.
Yeah, so there's one that now has 2 that it can be.
Okay. Okay, so. So which one's right? Which one do you want?
Well, that's kind of the point of the quiz.
I know. Okay, which grammatical degree can be used as another?
Yeah. If it's this one, it could be this one or that one.
Okay, so it must. Okay, I hope my brain isn't like going in 2 different directions.
Oh, just 2 choices.
And 3, I got kind of lazy. I also ran out of space.
2. The DPR is absent. Okay, where's the DPR?
It's not the DPR that you need to be worried about. It's the adjective that you need to be worried about, and whether it's attributive, substantival, etc. So look for where it's talking about adjectives that are attributive, substantival, or those kinds of things.
Is that in week?
That was in the same lesson.
Week 5?
Yeah.
Okay, so, okay. Insufficiency.
I like that, John.
Got to have a little bit of fun in here, otherwise you just go crazy.
Okay. Oh my gosh.
And all the formal people who do Greek the formal way are looking at number 5 and saying, wow, that's way too easy. I'm saying, no, I think it's just fine. Which one you stuck on?
2.
2?
Don't let him fool you. Oh, wait, I'll show you what. It's on the page.
It just has 3 basic functions. Is that where we're at?
Yeah, it'll be talking about the functions and how you determine which
See
function it
this
is.
right here? In this page. Right above it. Letter E. Letter E. Talking to 4th grader, number E.
Well, actually, that's entirely correct because there was a long time that languages did not have proper numerals.
Oh.
And so if you wanted to refer things as numbers, well, in Greek it would be alpha was 1, beta was 2, gamma was 3, delta was 4. So it would be literally number alpha, number A.
Okay.
Okay, that's a lot easier than I thought it was. Okay.
Yeah. Number 2 is the answer that is always the safe one. It might not be technically correct, but it is a safe answer.
Yes, okay. I know I try to make things more complicated than they are, but okay. Personal pronouns. I think I know the answer, I just want to make sure.
Which one you stuck on?
4.
4?
I say A.
Yeah, that's a good answer. That's a good answer.
Look at number 4 in your homework.
Yeah, I was going to say that. This should sound familiar to
4.
you.
Oh, okay. You sound maybe more than what it should be.
You're making a lot more of it than it needs to be.
That's the word I want. Okay, let me look at that again. Okay. Okay. How do I figure that out?
You have a chart for that one. On one of them. It's that one, exactly.
Okay, so. Okay. Okay, got it.
Are we good?
Yes.
All right. Sorry, Alex, but I'm going to have to mute you. And now to see how we did. Get my pen. Love my little pen. All right, so for number one, let's start off with the fairly obvious. Which one of these for number one was definitely wrong?
I don't know.
Positive.
No.
Oh.
Definitely wrong.
Oh, superlative.
No.
Accusative.
Well, then it has to be accusative.
Accusative.
Okay.
Now the question is, why is it that accusative definitely cannot be the right one? Because accusative is not a degree. Accusative is a case.
Ah,
Completely different category.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Positive, comparative, and superlative are all degrees.
Oh,
Accusative
okay.
is a case.
Okay, I see.
Yes.
Category distinctions. All right, so that one was the one that was definitely wrong. What do we get for being the right one?
See.
See,
You are correct.
that's what I thought. Superlative
I
was
wrote
definitely
a
wrong.
line down.
Yeah.
I thought if I copied
Yeah, the comparative can be what too?
superlative
And?
and comparative.
Yeah. It can always be itself, but it can also be superlative.
Yes.
Now, does that?
Vice versa.
It does not work vice versa, though. The superlative is just superlative. Yeah. So not that one, not that one. Comparative can be both superlative and comparative. The other ones are what they are. And accusative isn't even a degree. It's not even a part of that category. Number two, I tried to make this fairly obvious. I underlined it and everything, but it still messes with people. I said, when the DRP is absent, what will help you determine whether an adjective is attributive, substantival, etc.? So given that, which one of these is definitely wrong?
The DRP.
Yeah, it's absent.
I didn't even see that earlier.
Yeah.
It's absent, so it cannot be there.
Okay.
Literally, by definition. As for the conditions of the question, it's not there. All right, so that's the one that's definitely wrong. What did you guys get for being the right one?
Context.
The context. You are correct. Like we said in this class, that's one's usually a fairly safe answer. There might be something more specific that we could say, but in general sense, context is pretty safe to say. Yeah, it would not be the consonants. Okay, I don't really care if it's a beta or a delta. Those are both consonants. That doesn't really have anything to do with how an adjective is functioning, though. That doesn't really matter. And then the case doesn't really tell me that either. It's the context. Yeah. All right, so number three. Which is true of koine personal pronouns? A, the third person pronoun is always truly personal, or B, the second person pronoun never has a gender?
B.
That is correct. What is the problem with A?
Because third persons are not truly personal.
You are correct. When they're not truly personal, what do they basically translate as? Did you guys ever get the chance to look that up?
No.
Would they just be neutral?
Same. It means same.
Same.
Yep. So instead of meaning he, she, or it, it means same. This same thing. So a lot of times it'll be, this same thing did that. This thing that was referencing this other thing. So it hardly ever comes across in translation like that because it's just really awkward to say.
Yeah.
But that's how the Greek reads.
Oh, okay.
This same did this or that or the other.
Oh,
This same belongs to this, whatever.
that is a first.
Yeah, so you'll almost never see it translated exactly like that, but that's basically how the Greek reads.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Tidbits, side little tidbits.
Yeah.
All right, number four. The case of a koine pronoun usually depends on what? Which one of these is definitely wrong?
A.
Yeah.
Oh, you spotted it.
That's the one I was, yeah, that's it. I'm going to say that one.
I actually, when I was teaching, I liked putting one in there that was definitely wrong and kind of funny, just so those students who get stumped on something would have something fun to put in there.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson, I think it's this one, and everyone would get a good laugh out of it, and that way the kid wasn't too embarrassed, you know. Of course, then there were some of them that just specifically looked for those to answer. It's like, you got an F on your paper, bud, because you wanted to pick all the funny answers. That's not what they're there for, but yeah. All right, so that one was definitely wrong. What did you guys get for being the correct answer?
Function.
It's function. Yeah, how it is functioning in the sentence or the clause or whatever is usually going to determine what its case is. Now, its gender and its antecedent, that actually can happen with relative pronouns where we'll take on something relative to gender. The case wouldn't be dependent on its own gender, though, which would be weird. But sometimes the relative pronoun will pick up what its antecedent has. That one is a possibility, but mostly just with relative pronouns. Its gender really isn't a good answer, though.
Yeah.
All right, and then the bonus is the Koine word human, singular or plural.
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 It is plural, you are correct.
Because that chart said so.
Because that chart said so. Yep. Ta-da! All right, so did we at least get to the 3 out of 4 mark?
Yes, I got them all right.
I got them all with a lot of help.
There you go. All right, so not too bad. Not too bad.
That's where I write things down that he says that aren't part of his. Sometimes those help when you ask questions.
Sometimes they do a little bit.
And sometimes I write them down and I go, what did this say? That's my problem.
All right, so today we don't really have a ton to cover. I mean, we'll still probably go to time. But the nice thing is we'll probably fit all of it into this one lesson instead of breaking it into 2. So we're going to cover conjunctions, particles, and interjections. I originally thought that this was going to include prepositions, which would have been a little bit more interesting to talk about, to be honest, but it also would have taken up a lot more time. So conjunctions, particles, and interjections is better for time.
Okay.
All right, so let's go into conjunctions. Conjunction, junction, what's your function?
Words and phrases and clauses.
Oh, wow.
You know you're a 4th grade teacher when, or just an elementary teacher when.
It's on my shelf at school.
Schoolhouse rocks.
This.
All right, so basic definition. A conjunction is a word which connects words, sentences, and or paragraphs and shows the relationship between them. So I'm combining this with this other thing, and I'm showing what kind of relationship it is. So those are the main ideas behind a conjunction. It connects things, and it shows some kind of a relationship.
Connects. Relationship. Okay.
Yeah. Give us something to kind of anchor ourselves to. English examples of conjunctions include for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so, and there's others that you could include, but these are common ones. Yep. And there's someone here who actually knows this as a special acronym.
Me?
No, not you.
Okay.
No, the teacher.
Oh, okay. I was like, going, oh.
Yeah.
I teach it comma and, comma, nor, comma, but, because the comma comes first in an English sentence.
In an English sentence, this is true. I'm just listing words. But yeah, what's the acronym that they normally use for these?
I don't use the acronym.
Oh, you don't use the acronym? Fanboys.
Oh, fanboys. Yeah, I do that.
Yeah.
Duh. Fanboys.
Yep.
That's right.
F for for, A for and,
Oh.
N for nor, B for but, O for or, Y for yet, S for so. Fanboys. Not that you absolutely have to have this because this is a Greek course, but hey, you learn things.
No, I know what fanboys are.
Yeah. That was one thing that actually surprised me when I was studying Greek, is how much I wound up learning about English so that I could understand the Greek. You go back and you learn, what exactly is a preposition? I forgot.
Preposition.
Exactly. All right. Now in Koine, the 7 most common conjunctions are kai, hati, gar, hina, e'an, he'os, and ude. Rolls right off the tongue. There's a reason why I didn't make you write them all down. However, you will wind up seeing these pretty often, and so you'll kind of wind up memorizing them. The nice thing about conjunctions, though, is that they do not generally inflect. They don't generally change form, so kai will always be kai, hati will always be hati, gar will always be gar, so on and so forth. So if you wanted to spend time memorizing specific words, conjunctions actually would not be too bad because they're going to look the same no matter where they are.
That's good.
So that would be a little bit more productive than with some of the other Greek words that have like 1,000 different forms.
Yeah.
Yeah. You look like you're deep in thought.
I always am. I'm trying to pronounce these. I forgot my Greek letters. Is what I did.
Yeah. So the first one is kai,
Kai.
because alpha and the iota, that is a diphthong.
Yes.
Second one is hati, hati because it has the rough breathing mark there, so it's ha, hati.
Mm-hmm.
Third one is gar.
Gar.
Yep. And then the fourth one has a rough breathing mark on it as well. It is hina.
Hina.
Yep, hina. And that one actually is an important one. We'll have to come back to that one. We'll discuss it in a few seconds here. So hina, it's special. And then there's e'an.
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 Yeah. Epsilon e'an.
E'an.
And then the next one after that also has a rough breathing mark, so you have to have the rough breathing sound in there. So he'os.
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 He'os. And this is...
And then the last one does not have a rough breathing mark. The apostrophe is the wrong way. But it is a diphthong there, so it's u and then de. Ude.
Ude. Ude.
Right, and then the question becomes, what on earth do those mean? So let's look at definitions.
I don't know.
Yep. Now, kai is pretty much the standard coordinating conjunction in Greek. It works a lot like the way that we would use the word and in English. It can also mean, well, also and even, but most of the time it means and.
Usually it's and. Okay.
Usually, yep. That's its principal thing. It's the standard coordinating conjunction. It works almost identically to and. Now, if it gets paired up with something else, and we'll see this in one of the examples, if it gets paired up with something else, then there's a pretty good chance it's going to mean one of the other two.
Okay.
But if it's by itself, it's pretty much always going to mean and.
I'm finding that word a lot in my net Bible.
Yep.
In the notes, yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very, very common.
Yes.
And like I said, these are the 7 most common. There's other ones, but if you can get the 7 most common ones down, or at least have a place to look, like a handy little chart that gives you the basic definitions,
Yes.
you'll be far ahead. And then the next one is hati, and this is the conjunction that's usually used for explaining things. This because of that. This for that reason. This so that this will happen. Yeah. It's, well, not necessarily cause and effect, it's explanation. It's much more explanatory than it is cause and effect. Cause and effect would be more so the one that's under it, gar.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, that one's more so cause and effect. This happened since this happened over here. Indeed, this is true because of that one's more so cause and effect. Hina, this one's really important. This one shows purpose, generally, so that this can happen in order that that can happen. And this one actually changes how you need to understand the verb. If it is paired with a subjunctive verb, what it tells you is that it's a purpose clause. So instead of the verb being something that would be a possibility or a probability, you need to state it as a purpose, so it's usually going to be some form of will. So instead of this might happen or this could happen, it will be this will happen. So whatever the verb is, it's going to have to include some version of the word will. This is definitely going to happen, so that this would take place. Will, would, something like that. This is a definite now. Instead of indefinite, it's definite. This is what it's supposed to be. It's a purpose clause. Happens so that this will happen for this reason. On is pretty straightforward. If or whenever. So,
Whatever, okay.
yeah, it's pretty straightforward. And os is pretty straightforward as well, until. It doesn't really vary a whole lot from that in most of the translations that you guys will see. One of my favorite ones is ude, neither nor not even. I like those ones.
Even.
Yeah, ude. Ude. Yeah, neither nor or not even. Basically, it's, yeah. I just like the negatives. Negatives are always fun. Yeah. So neither this nor that, not even this one. Those kinds of things. All right, so those are the 7 most common conjunctions in Greek. Yes, there are others, but this is at least a heads up, and we'll cover most of what you guys will see. And the one that you need to watch out for is the hina, because not only does it have its own translation, but it will change how you translate the verb as well. You have to take the verb and make it something that will happen, will take place.
Like, will whatever or would whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah. And there are technically words in English that can be definite and indefinite, and a lot of the older translations will use those words, like the English word might, for example, can be used as both a definite and an indefinite. You can say, I might go to the store. That would be an indefinite use of the word might. Or you could say, I turned off the lights that I might go to sleep. Well, if you say that, you're not saying, oh, I was thinking about go to sleep and I might or might not. No, you did go to sleep. Mm-hmm. That's a definite use of the word might. However, the problem is that modern English readers, they don't always differentiate between the 2 uses of might. And so it's better to use something like will. Mm-hmm. So something that's definite, so that I could go to sleep or something like that.
Okay.
It's a purpose clause telling me I did this for this reason. Okay. This was the intended purpose of my action. Yeah, the others are pretty straightforward, but you do have to watch out for that one because it will affect how you translate the verb.
Okay.
All right, and then we get the fun stuff. Of course.
I have a different definition of
Yeah. Now, the one after this one I'm actually going to have you guys run through together, but this one I'm going to do for you. All right, so the first word that we have there is ace, and that is a preposition, means to. We haven't covered prepositions yet, so I'm going to have to give that one to you guys. That's why I already put the to in there. And then the next word is tuta. We actually covered that in the last lesson. It means this. And for purposes of learning here, I'm not going to call it for, but in the homework, I could have asked you to translate that because we had that in the last lesson. Now, actually, on this homework lesson, I was actually kind of nice. I shouldn't have been, but I got lazy when writing up the homework assignment. So, won't have as much of that kind of stuff to do. The gar, though, the gar is something that we are covering this time. That is one of our 7 coordinating conjunctions. Well, not all of them are coordinating, but it's one of our 7 conjunctions that we need to know. Gar would be for, would be kind of the standard translation for that one. And this is a weird thing that you'll notice with a lot of the conjunctions. They don't always occur at the beginning of the phrase or the clause. A lot of times there'll be a few words in, and you will have to actually take them and put them in front. And this is especially true when there's a preposition involved. Yeah, prepositions always take precedent over conjunctions. Pretty much always. I don't think I've seen an example where that's different. Okay. If you have both a preposition and a conjunction involved, the conjunction will always come later. It doesn't actually, when you translate it, you don't put it later because that would be really weird. But in Greek, they'll always put the conjunction like somewhere down the line if there's a preposition involved.
Okay. So then we have to kind of reposition.
We have to reposition it. So for to this, you all were called. You're right. Hati is usually a conjunction of explanation, so because works pretty well there. And then, like I said, kai normally means and, but when it's paired up with something else, another conjunction or something like that, then it will usually wind up taking on one of the other meanings. So for to this, you all were called because, and then the kai there, it's paired up with something else. It's probably not going to mean and.
Because also?
Some translations would do it like that, but I really don't like that one. I would say because even, it's still kind of an awkward translation, but we'll say even for this one. Yeah. So for to this you all were called, because even, and then Christos is anointed. In most English translations, they just translate it as Christ, but it actually means anointed. They don't actually translate it as what it means. They translate it like it sounds. Because the anointed one suffered on behalf of you all. I already gave all that to you in there.
Okay, because even the anointed one?
Because even the anointed one suffered on behalf of you all.
Okay, just a second.
And do pay attention to the Greek commas.
Suffered on behalf of you all.
Yeah.
Right?
Because even the anointed one suffered on behalf of you all. And then here's another one where things are out of order a little bit. We actually have two verbs here that have the same nominative, which is anointed. So the anointed is the one who suffered, and the anointed is the one who is giving. So that next phrase there is going to be giving to you all, because this one is dative, giving to you all a pattern. And I have to put the A in there because Greek does not have an indefinite article, and when we say it, we have to do it with an indefinite article. That's just English. But in most other languages, they don't have an indefinite article. They just look at you like you're really weird and being picky about nothing for no good reason. But in English, we put in A. Yes?
Okay, you have two you alls?
Yes.
Okay, and totally different phrases separated by a comma.
I don't see the comma.
After humon, there's a comma there.
There, okay.
Yeah, it's in the Greek.
Okay.
Yeah, pay attention to the Greek punctuation.
There we go. You said that, but I was just looking at the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Okay, you all giving, right? You all giving?
Yeah, giving a pattern to you all, because that second you all is dative. So giving a pattern to you all.
Also, you move that word to the end.
You could also say giving to you all a pattern. It's kind of, at that point, kind of stylistic choices. But the main point is that you get that it's dative, so it's to you all. You have to have that in there somewhere. So giving to you all a pattern, or giving a pattern to you all. Something along those lines. But that to you all has to be in there.
Okay. Where's the to you all?
It's you all, but in the parsing code it tells you that it's dative.
Oh.
So,
okay.
yeah, always make sure you check your parsing codes.
Okay. But you can move it. Right.
You can move it, yeah.
I think it sounds better moving that whole phrase, you all, to the end.
I kind of like that too. And then for the last phrase that we have there, we have the hina. In order that. But what's the special thing about hina? What do we have to remember with hina? What does it also do? It has its own meaning for the conjunction.
It
but
makes it happen.
It's something. Will or would.
Yeah, it makes whatever the verb is into a definite. For this reason, it's a purpose clause. So that you all will follow. This is a subjunctive verb, and we're putting in that will in there. It's not you all might follow in the more typical sense of the word might, but you will follow. This is a purpose clause. This will happen. So that you all will follow.
We could add the word other.
Okay.
The footsteps of him.
No.
No. The footsteps in. His.
Not quite. We're not there yet.
Okay, sorry.
To you all. Okay.
So that you all will follow, and then we'll get to where we're trying to go. Yeah, so that.
So that.
You all will follow.
The hina there
tells us what we need to do with the verb. In the verb, we have to have the will. I already gave that to you because that verb is subjunctive.
Oh, that's where it is.
Yeah. Okay. I won't always do that with you. I'll tell you if it's subjunctive or not, but I won't always put in the will there. You'll have to put that in on your own. Yeah, if the verb is subjunctive, it makes it something that's definite. It's a purpose clause. It's not saying that this could happen. It's saying this is the reason why I did this other thing. It's a purpose clause. I did it for this reason. So why is it that Jesus suffered on behalf of you? Why is it that he gave you a pattern? So that you all will follow him.
So you all will follow. Okay.
All right, then we need that last part.
So when we come across this, hina, we'll put that, but we'll need to put will in the following.
You'll need to make it into some kind of a purpose clause instead of something that's indefinite.
Okay.
Something that's instead of something that's a mere possibility.
Okay, so the next clause will have to be kind of tweaked with will or would or something to that effect. Okay.
Yeah, usually some version of the word will.
Okay. It'll just be that indicator of something needs to be adjusted here.
Yeah.
More
This is a for this reason, for this purpose. It needs to indicate that. What is the purpose? It needs to be stated accordingly.
Yes. Okay.
All right, and then the next two words that we have are dative, and they're dative plural neuter, so they both go together. One is the DRP, which we're going to translate as the here, and the other one basically means footsteps. It doesn't actually quite mean footsteps in English. It's actually more like the imprint that the foot leaves behind. So you could actually translate it as footprints if you wanted to, which would be a little bit weird in English, but it literally means footprint, not footsteps. But it's more natural in English to translate it as footstep.
So is that what you want, footsteps or footprint?
Footsteps is fine. Okay. I'm just telling you what the picky behind it is.
Oh.
If you were to look it up in the lexicon, you'd find out that it's actually a little bit different than what I put here. But the main thing that we need to worry about here is that both of them are dative, which means that there's usually going to be some kind of a preposition involved. So that you all will follow to the footsteps? In the footsteps, yeah. So for these datives, we're gonna say it goes with the preposition in. So in the footsteps. And then our last word has a genitive. And what's our helping word with genitives usually? Of. Yep. Yep. So in the footsteps of him. So as a translation, for to this you all were called, because even the anointed one suffered on behalf of you all, giving a pattern to you all, so that you all will follow in the footsteps of him.
Okay. Yeah, that's a big one.
It's a good big long one. Yeah, and Greek sentence structure typically is much longer than English sentence structure is. And, well, actually English sentence structure used to be a lot longer as well, but people got dumber and dumber and they said, well, we'll just make things short. But yeah, English actually used to be considerably longer in its sentence structure as well.
We've certainly shortened it up.
We have very much so shortened it up.
Sometimes to our detriment.
Sometimes, yes. Some people like the shorter style because it is easier to understand, but that means you also can't understand the complicated stuff. You do. If you were to do a direct translation of the New Testament into English, maintaining the sentence structure and the full meaning of all the words and everything, you would get, it would depend on the section of the New Testament that you're talking about, but most sections would range somewhere between a grade 10 reading level and a grade 18 reading level.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so for us in the modern period, that's somewhere between 10th grade and graduate master's level reading material. Always love it when people make fun of the New Testament authors and say, oh, they're just a bunch of fishermen. Well, those fishermen were smarter than your average American, so...
Okay.
So don't be too hard on them. They understood things that you cannot, you will not.
Yeah. Okay, and the underlines on there, the reds on there, are the conjunctions.
Yes, those are the conjunctions, yeah.
Okay, so there was 4 of them?
Yep. Now you'll notice that there are 5 reds though, because one of those affected the verb.
Okay, because even were both different. Okay, and because the will was part of
So that. Mm-hmm.
And so was added to make it flow, right?
so that is just part of the conjunction.
Yeah.
Hina is very typically translated as so that.
Okay. Because you don't have that up here in your definition.
No, I don't.
Yeah. It's one of those little added flow type things. Okay.
Yeah. It's kind of under the category of in order that, so that.
Oh, I guess you were supposed to. I read it over here.
Yeah, there were spaces for it.
I didn't see that until I went, oh.
That's okay. It's on the next page. Yeah. I probably should have announced that. I apologize. For those of you who are listening online, the lines for writing in the translation are going to be on the next sheet, so make sure you turn that over. It's probably a little too late for some of you.
I can write it in later.
I'm talking about the online people.
Yeah.
They'll probably make they'll discover the same thing. Yeah. All right. So that's conjunctions. Pretty straightforward. Yeah. There's only one conjunction that really ever gives anybody problems, and which one is that one?
Hina.
Hina, yeah. And as long as you remember that it affects the verb and it makes things purpose so that they indicate a purpose, it makes them definite, you're good to go.
Okay. Purpose.
Yep, it's a purpose clause. Hina makes things into a purpose clause.
Okay.
So hina plus subjunctive equals purpose clause.
Okay.
All right.
Every time you see a hina, there is going to be a subjunctive, right?
Not necessarily.
Oh.
So if you have hina and subjunctive together, then it's a purpose clause.
Okay, how do you know it's a subjunctive?
Because I will tell you.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Or it'll be in the parsing code.
Or in the parsing code.
Yeah,
Okay.
but we haven't gotten to verbs yet,
Okay.
so you don't really have that. So right now I'm going to have to tell you if it shows up.
With a subjunctive.
Yeah, it's hina with a subjunctive that becomes a purpose clause.
Okay. So with a subjunctive equals purpose. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, you can have a hina without a subjunctive.
Okay.
It's not very common though.
Okay.
Right, and then next we have particles. Particles are kind of a weird thing. We do technically have them in English, but they're a category that shows up a lot more when you're talking about other languages, and they're kind of a catch-all category. Okay. This is the basic definition of particle. There really isn't a good one, unfortunately. But the basic idea is that it's a function word of some kind, and it's uninflected, which means it doesn't change its form, like most other Greek words. Most other Greek words change form all the time. But like we just discussed, conjunctions don't really change form, and so technically a lot of people would actually put them under particles because they're uninflected. But here's the real caveat that distinguishes a particle from a conjunction, is that a particle does not fit into any of the main grammatical categories. It's not a noun, it's not an adverb, it's not a preposition, it's not a conjunction usually. It doesn't fit into any of the main forms. We call it a particle. It's a kind of a catch-all. If it doesn't fit in any of these categories, it's a particle. And it has to be generally uninflected. And in Greek, it is a huge category. So in English, there's words that we can use as particles. We usually have other meanings for them as well, but we can use them as particles. Words like to, up, not, well, oh, but they're usually a part of other phrases. Up to, tidy up, things like that. Those are used in a particular manner where they're not being used in a more normal manner. They're considered particle uses, but we don't usually think of them in English in that sense. So it's actually kind of hard to think of English particles. In Koine, on the other hand, though, particles are very numerous and very diverse. A couple of examples include that and may. That and may, that is kind of can work as a conjunction, but it has lots of other uses. And may is one of the negatives, so I included it because I like negatives. They're fun to play with. But yeah, it's a huge category. It covers all kinds of different things. And yeah, it's really hard to limit it down to one specific rule or on anything. It's just kind of it's a catch-all group. That's exactly what it is. And what makes things kind of annoying is that when Mounce describes things as either being a particle or not, he's not consistent on how he does it. In the compact guide, he'll give you he'll say that this is definitely a particle in the description and in the lexicon on the back of the compact guide. He'll say this is a particle. But you look it up in the interlinear, and he'll do it how basically closest to how it's being used in the interlinear. So if it's kind of being used as a conjunction, he'll just label it a conjunction. But it's actually a particle. But it's being used as a conjunction. So yeah, Mounce is not going to be consistent on that one. That's another place where Mounce is nice and cheap, but he's also, there's a reason why it's cheap. And frankly, there are actually disagreements among different Greek scholars on how they want to classify particles. Because particles do kind of branch into other areas, so some people say, no, that really should be listed as a conjunction. And other people say, no, it's truly a particle because it doesn't really get used very often as a conjunction. And arguments go back and forth.
So, Mounce might keep things just kind of simple in some cases.
Well, he doesn't keep things simple because he doesn't keep things consistent. In one case he'll say, it's a particle. In another case he'll say, no, it's a conjunction, even within his own material. His compact guide and his interlinear do not agree on which is which. Yeah, I found that out when I was setting up the homework, and that's basically why I decided to go easy on the homework on this one, is because, like, Mounce can't even get this straight. I'm not going to make them get this straight. All right. Part D, Koine particles are notorious for being used in a variety of ways, like I was saying. Hence, a fairly full lexical entry that is something comparable to or more extensive than the entry in the interlinear's lexicon should be consulted before finalizing any translation. So basically what I'm saying is, when it comes to these kinds of words, make sure you look it up and you've checked all the possible meanings to look and see which one fits in the context first. It's not going to just be a default, oh, I can plug in this particular word, because they can be used a lot of different ways. I can't say it always means this, because it won't always mean this. It'll have a lot of different meanings. And you'll have to go through and actually figure out which one is contextually the best. You just can't standardize particles. You can't standardize words in general, but you especially can't do it with particles. Now, in retrospect, what we should have done is we should have put together a LOGOS study group first. That would have been helpful.
Okay, you have the
bounce ideas off of each other.
Something comparable to or more extensive. Is there a word missing there?
No.
Am I not?
Something comparable to or more extensive than an entry in the interlinear's lexicon.
Okay.
It's another one of those examples of English being more complicated.
There you go. Comma or. There we go.
Nah, I'm just going to do it the old Greek way. Capital letters, no spaces between words, no punctuation. Just figure it out. I love reading through the older manuscripts that way. It's like, it's a puzzle. I still have no clue what half of it says.
Okay, fairly full lexical entry should be consulted before finalizing any translation. Okay.
So in other words, it can be used in a ton of different ways. Read through the lexicon, make sure you get all the different ways it can be used. Check the context, figure out which one's going to be the most appropriate, because it's not always going to be the first one on the list with these ones. With most of them, you look for the first few things that are on the list, and that'll give you a pretty good idea which direction to go. With particles, that is not the case. They can be used almost any way.
So the particles, you've got to keep it broader and bring in more.
You've got to have a lot more context to help you figure out what that specific word is going to mean. Yeah, they're interesting. Further, particles sometimes take on non-typical meanings when used in specific phrases. So not only are they used in this huge variety of ways, you'll have cases where they just mean something not completely different, but they don't really mean what they mean because they're being used in a specific phrase. For example, in English, the word up can be used as a particle when it's used in the phrase tidy up. Up normally indicates a direction.
Yes.
Literally upward. But if I say I want you to tidy up your room, I'm not saying I want you to put your room in to the attic or something like that. I'm not telling you which direction to take your room. Instead, I'm using a specific phrase, basically idiomatically. It's a phrase that we use to describe it, but it's not actually a location. And the same thing will happen with particles in Greek. So, for example, may, when it's used in the phrase eon may, well, eon by itself normally means if. It's one of the conjunctions. And may is a particle, which kind of sort of means not. So if you were just read them in order, it'd be if not. But it's actually an idiomatic phrase in Greek. It's used to mean unless. And if you read the two words by themselves, you wouldn't get unless out of it. You have to know that it's being used as an idiom. So that's another thing you'll want to look at in the lexicon. Does this word actually change meanings when it's being used in conjunction with other words?
And how will you know that?
The lexicon will tell you.
It will tell you. Okay.
And by the way, I'm telling you this one right now. Et en may is a special idiomatic phrase.
It
May.
may. This
Is
one right here.
Yep. Yeah. It means unless. Yeah. This is actually one of the few cases where you have multiple words in Greek that translate into one word in English. That does not happen very often.
Okay. Equals unless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the way they use those two words together would be the way we use the single word unless in English.
Okay.
Yeah. But if you look up may in a good lexicon, it will tell you that when it shows up with et on, it means something else that it normally doesn't.
Okay, say that again.
So if you look up may in a good lexicon, it will tell you that it means something different when it's paired with et on.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So it doesn't always mean unless then?
Et on may means unless.
Okay.
Not may by itself. It has to be with et on.
Okay.
If it's et on may, then it means unless.
Okay.
All right. All right, and then this translation I'll let you guys play with a little bit.
Yeah, what else?
Uh-huh. Most of the stuff I've given you, well, except for the DRP, but most of the other stuff I've given you, just focusing on the particles. And on some of them I did a double because Mounts does a double. He'll call it a particle in one place and call it an conjunction in another place. That's why some of them have two designators on them. It's because I'm following Mounts and Mounts isn't consistent. And the particles will work a lot like the conjunctions do, in that sometimes you have to move where they are for it to make sense in English. So yes, that un will get moved out in front. That's true.
So how's particle conjunction supposed to help me with that word?
It doesn't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, particles and conjunctions, well, neither group actually does a whole lot morphologically. They're non-inflected words, and so they don't really change a whole lot. There are some exceptions to that, but generally they don't change. And so the basic meaning is what you're going after and trying to figure out the context to figure out which one of those meanings, because particles can be used in tons of different ways. Trying to figure out which one is going to be most appropriate is the struggle. But the parsing code, not really a big issue here.
Okay, so if you've got the parsing code, you don't need to worry about the other, right?
No, exact opposite. The parsing code is not going to be very much help at all in these ones because they don't inflect. So what you need is the number and the context.
Okay.
Look up the number, try to figure out what the context is talking about, put the two together in a way that makes sense.
PL is plural, right?
Nope, particle.
Oh,
I know.
well, that's funny.
I know.
All
P,
right.
just P
Just
is.
P.
Like I said, on these ones, don't worry about the parsing code so much. The big thing is the definition. Look up the number, look at the context. PL, CJ, not going to mean a whole lot here. Particles and conjunctions don't literally morph. They don't really have morphology. So the parsing codes are practically useless on these ones. which is very different from pronouns, which we went over last time. So if you guys figured out the un yet, the 4036.
43.
It's
I'd say
either
then.
Yeah.
either then or now then.
Then works.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I think that would
They
be.
called out again.
Yeah. Then they call that again.
Saying.
Okay.
And they call that again, saying.
Say not.
Which one are you looking at?
Looking at the one that you call the DRP.
Ah, yes. The deterministic relative pronoun.
Yeah. Clear is the. That goes leave this.
Mm-hmm.
D is dative, so true.
No, that D doesn't mean dative on the DRP. That D is for determiner.
So,
The Barabbas?
this works.
It's not a demonstrative.
The he. I got my list right up. I guess it's not making sense.
He who is.
He who is, well, so there's my he, and then who. Okay, he who, I got 3 columns. He who, okay.
A lot of times the DRP will be made up of 3 words.
Okay, now how do you figure out the DRP again? Where is that?
You look on your yellow card right here with 3 columns, and you still get mixed up.
Yeah, there is a chart somewhere in the homework on one of the previous lessons. It was a lesson on nouns and articles.
Week 4.
Oh, okay.
Okay. But he who is, Barabbas.
Oh, so is this one you just have to kind of figure it out?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, you try different things. You say, does the Barabbas work? Not really. So you try another combination, and any of the other combinations are going to have more words in them.
Put that butt somewhere else.
Actually, are you talking about the Allah?
Yeah.
That one's actually good where it is.
Okay.
Yep. And the may is good where it is as well.
Saying, not this, but he who, not him,
But he who is Barabbas, yeah.
not. Then I've got that 3590, which I must have said there's something I didn't say.
Well, what are you getting for the
No.
3590?
I put not,
Yeah, that's fine.
okay.
Yeah.
So. they
So
put
not
that.
this one.
Then they call that again, saying,
Uh-huh.
not this one,
Yep. But he who is Barabbas.
he who. So I left out the word one. How come I didn't put a 1 there?
Because you forgot that demonstratives can elevate without a DRP, whereas most other
Another one.
pronouns and adjectives will have to elevate with the DRP. So if a this or that or these, some kind of demonstrative, is not being directly applied to a noun, it generally is self-elevating. And this is something that most people will probably have forgotten, so I'll let you know on this one. On the bottom one, you have 3 words that have the nominative. Of those, 2 are nouns. And you also have a verb of being over here. One is going to have to be on one side of the verb of being. One of those nouns is, the other one's going to be on the other side of it. So is it Barabbas was rebel, or is it rebel was Barabbas?
Barabbas was a rebel.
Barabbas was a rebel. And how do you know it is that Barabbas goes first?
Because he's a proper name.
Nope. No, it's because Barabbas has a DRP in front of him. Now, the one that has the DRP in front is the one that is the proper subject when you have a verb of being.
Okay, so I can't figure out 1254 what it's supposed to say.
The particle is supposed to mean to God, which is and.
I will give that one to you guys because that one's a little hard to figure out, especially in this one. But you will eventually have to pick up on this on your own. But in this case, it's going to be closer to, if I can get my pencil to write, it's going to be closer to yet.
Yes.
Yet. Yet he who was Barabbas was a rebel.
And they don't say yet anywhere in this thing.
Yeah.
Nope, they don't. That's why I had to give it to you.
So how do you find that out?
A lot of experience. What most people will do when they're taught this is some teachers are really mean. They'll basically give you well, if you're taught like you guys are being taught, where you have a lot of parsing codes, they'll basically say, read a chapter in the Greek New Testament for homework tonight.
Oh, gee, I quit.
And so you'd have the Greek New Testament there that you guys have with your interlinear, and you'd be going through the Greek words. You'd be going through the English words in the interlinear part. You'd be going through the parsing codes and the lexing, trying to figure out how it all fits together. And eventually you'd figure out that some of these words can be used in really interesting ways in English translation.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a lot of what any language is you just have to experience it. So you sit there and you have to read through it at some point. I want to give you guys a little bit more of a foundation before you start reading through it, and you can do the reading on your own. But at some point, you do have to just sit there and say, I wonder what this says in Greek, and just kind of try to figure it out as you go.
Okay.
And that's why you guys have the interlinear, so that eventually you can get to the point where you can just sit down and start reading the text, comparing it with the English, and figuring out how things correlate.
Okay.
But yeah, we're not there yet.
Okay, so the next DRP.
Probably wouldn't be good to say the Barabbas.
No. Oh, would it be he who is again?
Not is, because it's no longer a part of what is being said anymore.
Okay.
He who was Barabbas.
He who was Barabbas, yeah.
Okay.
He's dead now. He'd been dead for a
I
while.
put the word yet in there.
Yet. Well, I'll go ahead and give this because I think you guys have most of it.
Called out saying, not this one, but he who was Barabbas. Yet.
The first DRP will be is Barabbas, because it's in the statement that's actually being said, what they were saying.
Okay. The first DRP.
Oh, there is 2 Barabbases. Okay, he who is Barabbas.
The first one is he who is, and the second one is he who was.
Mm-hmm.
He died between those 2. A few words there.
Wow, that was a quick death. And Barabbas. Okay, so Barabbas the rebel, right?
No.
The rebel's at the end.
Yeah, you have a verb of being in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's on the screen.
Oh.
This one, but he who is Barabbas. Yeah, he who was Barabbas was a rebel. That's really awkward.
Welcome to Greek.
Yeah.
How do you know it was it? Oh, there's was. Okay. Oh, I see. Okay. So we just do rebel, and we just have to, wiggle words around.
Well, that generally is true. It's a little bit more specific than that, though.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
1840.
Okay, so.
Then. Not that man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was blah blah something revolutionary. Was a revolutionary. Whoa.
Just kind of an interesting translation.
It is.
which is not what the Greek says technically.
Yeah, I'm sure it doesn't.
Okay, you've got, again, comma, saying, comma, but that's not in the,
In the Greek, no.
no, you're just adding.
Well, this is what we've discovered before with the one that had the dash in it. There was no dash in the Greek, right?
Okay.
So in order to put it into English, a lot of times you'll have to add punctuation.
I see.
Part of it is because Greek sentences are really stinking long. And then the other part is because Greek punctuation simply does not map perfectly onto English punctuation anyways.
Okay. Not this. Okay, and then one was added because not this, but you're like saying not this one, but, right?
Mm-hmm.
The one is that added whatever.
Yep. Yeah, and when you have a demonstrative, we're talking about this one, when you have a demonstrative by itself, it usually elevates. So this one or that one, something like that.
Okay, elevation. Yes.
Yep,
One
and it's
elevated word, right?
Yeah, it's a self-elevation. Demonstratives can self-elevate. Most other words have to have a DRP in front of them to elevate, but demonstratives can self-elevate.
How do you know it was a demonstrative?
Because it says this.
Oh, this is a demonstrative?
Yeah, this,
Okay.
that, these, those are all demonstratives. Yep, and those ones, when they're by themselves, they can elevate by themselves. They don't need a DRP.
Okay, so let me still put it. He who is.
But he.
But he.
I'll take one of those out. There.
And he left all the way home.
Yet. He who was If I was writing it, I'd be got one of those.
One of those?
Barabbas was a rebel.
Well, a lot of times the DRP, when it occurs with names in standard Bible translations, they'll drop the DRP from names. So it'll just be, yep, Barabbas was a rebel.
Yeah.
However, that's not what the Greek says, because the Greek has a DRP there.
Yeah, it's just
But
redundant.
it seems really redundant in English,
Yeah.
but for a Greek-speaking person, it would sound weird to them if you did it that way. And you'll notice that with some people from other languages, they'll put a lot of prefatory material, especially when they're talking about people. And to us, it seems really weird, but to them, it's normal.
Okay, then I call that again saying not this one, but he who is Barabbas. Yet he who was Barabbas was a rebel. Okay, so I don't get why he says he who is versus he who was.
That's what I was just talking to him about.
Oh.
Okay.
It sounds redundant to us.
Yes.
Well, that was the DRP is the problem. What she's talking about is the difference in the tenses. Why is one present tense and one? Yeah.
Yes,
The
yes.
present tense is because these people were saying this at that time. So you're recording their speech. They said, we want he who is Barabbas. At that time, it was present tense. They wanted him right then. It was present tense to them.
So they're saying again, he who was Barabbas.
Not he who was. We want he who is Barabbas.
Yes. And then you go on.
But after that, it's outside of the quotes.
Yes.
Then we're talking about what happened in history.
Yes.
Barabbas isn't around anymore. This was happening back
This
then.
Barabbas that they were talking about in the quotes is a rebel.
Yeah.
Okay.
Was a
There are
rebel.
the-
He's not a rebel anymore.
Yeah.
I guarantee you he's not a rebel anymore.
Well, yeah. Barabbas the rebel. That is his name.
I get that part. Barabbas the rebel.
Okay, now I get what's going on. There we go.
Yeah, his cause has been lost.
Cool. Okay.
All right, and then I said let's look at John 8:40 in the NIV and NASB to get an idea of how they normally translate this.
Okay, and you've got this. Do you have those translations?
You have them in your interlinear.
Oh, that's an NASB?
Yep, it's NASB and
Okay,
NIV.
for that. Okay, John. 18. John.
No, not him.
find it here. Shh, no one knows. All right, so.
I can't find where 40 starts here. Oh, there we go. They shouted back, saying, "No, not that man, but the Barabbas." Now, Barabbas was the Barabbas, a revolutionary.
All right, so let's look at the NIV first, because it's definitely the interesting translation. It says, they shouted back. We just went over the Greek. Does it?
They shout.
It didn't say, well, you could translate the called out as shout. That part's okay.
Okay.
But what about back?
That's that, like the up, like the tidy up. No?
No. This is just the NIV being strange, because what the Greek says is again. They shouted again. They were shouting at one time, and then they started shouting again, is what the Greek says. But the NIV has been a little bit loose and said they shouted back.
I mean, it's like they're like talking back to them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So the NIV has a little bit different register than the actual Greek does.
Okay.
Yeah.
They called out again. They shouted back. So what would be the difference?
Well, the Greek says shouted again.
Again.
Or called out again.
Again. It happened again. Okay.
Yeah. So this one makes it relative to just that immediate interchange. One person said one thing and then they shouted back.
Okay.
That's what the NIV is doing, is it's limiting down to that interchange. The Greek, though, implies that this is actually something that had been a much longer conversation. It wasn't just that one little interchange.
Okay.
This is something that had been long and drawn out.
Okay.
Yeah, they shouted again. This is something that they had already brought up, is what the Greek says. Here it doesn't say that. It just says they shouted back this new thing. The Greek actually brings out that this is something that they had already mentioned.
Oh, they did it. They said the same thing again. Okay, now I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And that's what happens with dynamic translations. They want to make it nice and easy to read, but sometimes you'll miss things. Whereas right above that on the screen I have, it's labeled NAU, but it's actually the NASB. So they cried out again, which is basically what the Greek says. That's a good translation. Saying, and in the NAU or NASB, it actually has the saying in there, because that's what's in the Greek. In the NIV, does it have the saying? No, it just says they shouted back. The saying got completely dropped out.
Oh, okay, saying, I see.
Yeah. And then in the NIV, when it comes to saying, we don't want this guy, it says, no, not him. It has a double negative in there. Does the Greek have a double negative?
No.
No, it's a single negative.
So what's the difference?
Accuracy.
Oh, okay.
Is this actually what the Greek says?
Okay. So does it change the meaning?
Not significantly on this one.
Okay.
On the first part of it where they shouted back instead of they cried out again, that had some significance. That could lead to some interesting things.
Okay.
This one's not as significant that way with the double negative versus single negative, because in English we can actually have double negatives and single negatives, and as long as you have the context you'll understand what it means.
Okay.
But here's where the NASB actually did something that was a little bit interesting. They say not this man, which is accurate as far as having the single negative, but where did the man come from?
Yeah.
Because that's not in the Greek, is it? Now, instead it just says this. The Greek just says this. They put in the man to complete the elevation. When we complete the elevation, we usually say one, because we're not going to be specific about the noun. They went ahead and were specific about the noun.
Because they're talking about a man.
Because they're talking about a man. I personally don't like that, though. Because well, it's talking about Jesus.
So it's okay to be capitalized.
Yeah. That's the standard with NASB, is a lot of the personal pronouns of Jesus are capitalized.
Yes.
Yeah, so not this man referring to Jesus. I'm okay with that one. Except I don't like that it says man when the Greek doesn't say man. I prefer that it would say not this one. But not this man is a little bit clearer in English. And it's not completely inaccurate, but it doesn't say man in the text.
Okay, in the original.
Yeah.
But it is okay because you know that they're talking about Jesus, who is a man.
Well, but there's a lot of other things you could throw in there as well. The fact is that the original author, John, was not specific about it.
Okay.
He didn't say man. He could have. There's a Greek word for man. He didn't say that.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So I won't, if I'm going to try to translate as accurately as possible, I don't want to be specific about something that they weren't specific about. If they saw fit to leave it, why wouldn't I leave it? Why can't I just say not this one and leave it as John left it?
Okay. But right here in this Greek, it says not that man.
That's because that's in the interlinear.
Okay.
Is there actually a Greek word that means man there?
I don't know. I can't read it.
It's after. Look at the teuton.
Teuton. There we go.
Okay. Is there any word after teuton that actually by itself means man?
No.
No.
It goes to the but. It goes to the...
The Allah, the but,
I
yeah.
see what you're saying. Oh, okay.
Yeah. That is something that Mounce has added in. That is something that the NASB has added in. It's not actually there.
I see. I get what we're saying there. Okay.
Yeah.
I see. So not that, but we would say not that one.
Yeah, not that one, not this one. It's actually this. It's not that. It's the near demonstrative.
Okay.
So not this one would be more accurate.
Okay.
The NASB and also Mounce in his interlinear threw in an extra word. It doesn't greatly affect the meaning. That's true, but the original author wasn't specific there. If you want to be accurate to the original author, you shouldn't be either.
I see. But the implied from the previous context.
We could reasonably infer that it is a man that they're talking about,
Yeah.
opposed to a woman or something like that.
Jesus, yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that's not what John said.
Okay.
When John wrote it, that's not what he said. That is an inference. That is not actually the text itself.
Okay.
All right, and then going past that, so we have not this man, a little bit inaccurate. No, not him. Well, for the NIV, they put in a double negative, and then they included a third-person pronoun, him. There is not a third-person pronoun anywhere in there, but the NIV comes up with one.
No, not him. Him is the personal pronoun.
Yeah, there is no him in the Greek.
Yes.
There's a demonstrative there, but there is no third-person pronoun. It's not there. But again, that's a stylistic thing. It makes it flow easier. And that's why they do it. I don't like it, but that's why they do it. And then in the NIV, they say, no, not him, give us Barabbas. In the Greek text, is there any give?
No, but he who is.
Yeah. Is there any us?
No.
No. At least I got Barabbas right.
Yeah, Barabbas.
Okay, looking at the NAU, NASB, they just say but Barabbas. And that's actually pretty close to what the Greek text actually says, except there is technically a little bit more. In the Greek, it has the DRP in there, so it would be but he who is Barabbas, right?
Yeah.
Except that's not super great English style, so you can kind of understand why the NASB left that part out. But Barabbas. So not this one, but Barabbas. Yeah, that's suitable. But yeah, the NIV just kind of started making up stuff there. Give us Barabbas. There is no give. There is no us. All right. And then in both of these translations for the de, they decided to use the word now, which isn't necessarily bad. You can make arguments for it being now. I don't mind that if you want to do it with now. The only problem that I have with using now in that way is that de is usually a little bit more adversative. So it's not just simply continuing on. It's usually there's a problem here, and that's why I suggested yet.
Yet. Barabbas.
Yeah. One's a little bit more adversative than the other.
Yes, I get that. Yet would be better.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But that's a relatively minor issue.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, and then in the NASB, it has Barabbas was a robber, which actually is an appropriate translation of that word. It can be used that way. Mm-hmm. But the NIV has a really interesting take on it. But he had taken part in an uprising. Just saying he was a rebel sounds a whole lot cleaner to me.
Oh yeah, and it says revolutionary. They've got a Greek word there that they say means revolutionary.
Yeah, it's the same word that we translated as rebel.
Oh.
Let me see if I can find it here.
Okay, rebel and robber.
Yeah, is what I would personally prefer that they use for leistes.
Rebel or robber?
Yeah, so I brought it up here on the right-hand side. So this is the word.
Plunderer, robber,
Lace-taste.
highwayman,
Yeah.
bandit, brigand.
Yeah, so robber is actually the default meaning
Or rebel.
for lace-taste, for the Greek word lace-taste. And so robber, bandit, highwayman, that is the default word. However, in the context of a political criminal, it would be an insurrectionist, a revolutionary, a rebel. And that's the context that is being used here when it's talking about Barabbas. It's talking about him as a political criminal. Okay. And so you can kind of see where the NIV is saying things like taking part in an uprising, taking part in an insurrection, and things like that.
Closer to revolutionary in that one.
Rebel would be better, in my personal opinion.
Definition. In fact, the word rebel is not even in this list of words.
No, Mounts tends to follow along with whatever the NIV goes with.
But revolutionary is more accurate, right? Because it was more of a political situation in this instance.
Not with the way that would usually be used in the Roman world.
Okay.
Is that they wouldn't necessarily use the term revolutionary like we would.
Okay.
For us, especially in America, revolutionary it usually has a positive connotation. Because we have the Revolutionary War, we are revolutionaries. For us, it's a positive thing, but in the Greco-Roman world, that was not a good thing.
So insurrectionist might have been more.
Insurrectionist might have been better, or rebel would have been better. Insurrectionist would have been fine, but revolutionary usually has more of a positive connotation in modern America.
Okay. So why not taking part in an uprising?
Mostly just because it doesn't say take, it doesn't say part, it doesn't say in or uprising.
Okay.
They just
a lot of words.
They just added a ton of extra words for it. And yes, granted, the same basic meaning is there, but it's just one word in Greek. We don't need to have 1,000 for one word.
Okay, so yeah, now we're up.
Well, there's many different reasons for having an uprising too.
Huh?
There's many different reasons, many different causes and reasons for an uprising.
Yeah.
Yes.
But if you're a rebel or an insurrectionist, it's usually political.
It's a little bit more specific, yeah.
Yes.
I see. Okay, there we go.
Right. Moving on. We already talked about all that. Had fun looking at the NIV. Interjections. This will go quick. An interjection is a word, usually uninflected, which is used to interrupt or exclaim. In English, we have a ton of them. Like, ah, and oh, indeed, hey, boo, ouch, phew.
Yeah.
We have all kinds of interjections. We usually think of them with exclamation marks because that's pretty much how we use them. Use them all over the place. It's kind of reversed for Greek, though. Greek does not have many common interjections at all. In fact, there's only two main ones, and their use is not at all proportional. But one of them is uai, means woe, like calamity, bad things happening to you. Woe is you, that kind of woe. And then edu, there's another really close one, which is ede, but it doesn't show up as often. Edu, which is behold. Look at this. And that one is the one, I won't go into too much detail on it, but these two are the main ones, and like I said, their use is not at all proportional. One is used far more than the other. And there is ede, I think there might be a few other ones, but interjections are very rare in Greek. And so it'll seem really repetitive a lot of times because they'll keep using the same interjection again and again and again. And you're like, well, why were these people so repetitive? It's, well, because they didn't have that many interjections in the first place, so it's going to sound repetitive.
Okay, the interjection, oh, what is that word? Oh.
Uai?
Uai?
Yeah, uai. Uai. Uai.
And the other one is, Edo? Edu, okay.
Yeah, that's like the O and U in soup. Edu.
Edu, okay.
Yep. Uai and edu.
Okay, so.
Yeah, there's only two of them, at least two main ones. It's pretty easy to learn the interjections in Greek.
Woe and behold.
Yep.
Wait, oh,
Woe is you! Behold, look at this.
okay.
Yeah, like I said, there are some other interjections, but they don't show up nearly as often, and even these two are not at all proportional in how they're used.
Okay, so go on to the next, to D and E?
Yep.
Okay.
All right, so this is a fairly straightforward translation. There's only a couple parts that you guys really need to fill in. The DRP, and I need to bring up my pen. Where's my pen? My pen. Come to me, pen. The DRP we need to fill in, and then of course UI, but I already told you what UI means, and accidentally I gave you the translation, so hey, we're done.
There you go.
Well, that was simple. But yeah, most of it was already there. And she named the child Woe Barkaboth. That's a pretty short statement.
So is his name Woe?
Woe Barkaboth.
Okay, so it was Woe in there then?
Yep,
Okay.
yeah. His name is Woe Barkaboth.
Okay.
Barkaboth. Okay.
Yeah. Great name.
Yeah.
Plan on naming your next kid that. Maybe it can be a nickname for one of the grandies. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. So basically,
I know which way you want to
A little inflection on that word.
Yes.
yeah. Calamity child, calamity.
Whoa.
Right. And then hopefully on this one I won't actually give you the answer ahead of time. Let's try that one.
You won't?
I'll try not to.
Okay.
So again, need to translate the DRP and the interjection. What's the interjection going to be?
It is going to be...
We've already had woe, so what was the other one?
Behold!
That'd be behold.
Behold, yep. So, and behold.
So that's... I just wrote that word down. You think I'd remember it. I just wrote that my letters don't look quite like.
So the DRP, we just have to figure out from everything else.
Basically, yeah. Now there is one other thing that you need to worry about, and that has to do with the verb. In that verb, I tell you that the verb is passive, so you'll need to account for that as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, and behold, blank nations gathered against us. Wouldn't that be the?
Yeah,
Okay.
that would be okay. But you need to translate gathered in such a way that it's passive.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Passive changes the emphasis from who is doing the gathering to what is being gathered.
Have gathered?
No, that could still be them that are doing it. Passive is, it's not them that are doing it, but they are being gathered. But you're close.
Have, not have, then.
You're really close. You need
Has gathered?
No,
No?
no. It does need to have some form of has or have in there, but you also need another word as well.
Okay. Okay.
You need to make it clear that the nations are not gathering themselves.
They're being gathered.
Yep.
Are being gathered?
I was guessing.
Yeah, that's actually not bad.
Are gathering.
Yeah, in context, you would actually know that this is past tense. And you guys don't have it.
Have been gathered?
There you go.
Okay. Oh, so that's why have was okay.
Yeah.
I need to have them.
Been, yeah. And behold, the nations have been gathered against us. Yeah, the context would tell you that it was past tense, but passive means that they are not doing it themselves. It is an outside force.
The nations have been gathered against us.
Mm-hmm.
Have been, oh, gathered. Gathered, I'd sit gathered. Okay, so, and behold, okay, so the past, the PAS means past tense, right?
Passive, not past tense.
Passive. There we go.
Passive, as opposed to active.
Okay.
Active is the emphasis is on them doing this action. Passive is this action was done to them. So they are not gathering themselves. It's passive. It's being done to them. So here's the trick question of the day. If they weren't gathering themselves, who was gathering them?
Go.
Yep,
And the active you said was they were doing the action?
exactly. Yeah, so if it had been active, you could have said the nations gathered against us. They were doing it. They were the ones who were gathering. But it's not active, it's passive. So they have been gathered against us.
I have that distinction. I don't have that distinction. I have accusative.
When we first talked about the cases, the nominative, the genitive, the dative, and the accusative, that's when we talked about active and passive.
No, I didn't write that down.
Yeah, that was a while back.
Well, I wrote in passive, it goes with the noun. 2 or 4 makes it dative. That's what I wrote down.
And then that's the other fun thing about languages is there's all the little details. Little details all over the place.
I just want to talk.
I just want to talk to y'all.
I just want to talk to y'all.
All right, well, that is the end of what I have for you guys. We got through an entire week's lesson in 1 week, which is amazing. I think we did that on the first lesson, and yeah,
In that sense.
pretty much.
This is
All right, so
deep stuff.
see you guys that are online.